A lot of breaking news. We're going to go slow. A lot of details surrounding this Democratic memo put together by liberal Trump-hating Congressman Adam Schiff. Now, we'll dissect this thing point by point. We'll give you all the information that the media won't tell you about. But before we get into all of those details, here is the biggest takeaway. Everything from a year ago that we have been uncovering and telling you about involving rampant FISA abuses, spying on the Trump campaign, has actually now been corroborated by the Democrats. Now, it's all true. The Schiff memo was supposed to take on the credibility and challenge the memo that Congressman Nunes put out, but in reality, the exact opposite is happening. Now, here's why. Facts are facts. The truth is the truth. Both Republicans and Democrats are now confirming that the completely unverified Hillary Clinton bought and paid for dossier filled with Russian lies made a large part of the FISA application that was used to then spy on a member of the Trump campaign. And here's another key point you have to consider. Have you noticed the near radio silence from fake news CNN, conspiracy TV, MSNBC when it comes to the Schiff memo? The liberal media, they're not talking about it because they know that it proves all of the key findings and facts of the Republican memos. And now that you have that important background information, let's dive into this Democratic memo. Here's what this Schiff memo corroborates. Just like the Nunes memo in the House, the Grassley-Graham memo in the Senate, they lay out the FBI, the DOJ, did in fact lie and misled a FISA judge about the fact that Hillary Clinton and the DNC that she controlled actually paid for the Russian dossier full of lies. Now, Schiff, he actually quotes a section of the FISA application in his memo. It reads that the DOJ disclosed that Christopher Steele was approached by an identified U.S. person who's indicated to Source One, Steele, that a U.S.-based law firm had hired the identified U.S. person to conduct research regarding candidate number one's ties to Russia, Trump. The identified U.S. person and source number one have long-standing business relationship. Now, the identified U.S. person hired source number one to conduct the research. The identified U.S. person never advised source number one as to the motivation behind the research into candidate one's, Trump's, ties to Russia. The FBI speculates the identified U.S. person was likely looking for information that could be used to discredit candidate number one's campaign. Now, Hillary Clinton, the Clinton campaign, the DNC, here's the shock. They're never mentioned. In other words, they are outright lying by omission. Slowly. In other words, it is an indisputable fact that the FBI, DOJ lied to the FISA judge in order to get a warrant to spy on Trump campaign associate, he'll join us later, Carter Page. They purposefully and maliciously hid all ties to Clinton and the DNC because there's no way on this green earth that any FISA judge would ever have approved the application if, in fact, the judge knew that Clinton and the DNC paid over $12 million for a dossier to influence the election. And that last sentence about the FBI speculating about the purpose of the dossier, that's especially important because that indicates that the FBI and the DOJ, they knew about the political motivations behind the Russian paid-for dossier, and they used it anyway. Sound like a deep state? That key point has been proven, and it's undoubtedly true. Now, understand how profound this really is. You have the FBI, DOJ, they literally knew Hillary Clinton, her campaign, and the DNC she's controlling, that they paid for a dossier filled with Russian lies and Russian government lies. They covered up the fact before the FISA judge to get the warrant, and in the process, what are they really doing? They're shredding the Constitution, our Fourth Amendment protections. Schiff is also exposing himself to be a big fat liar. In this memo, he admits that the dossier had political motivations. But on February 2nd, after the Nunes memo came out, Schiff put out a statement. That statement reads in part, quote, "The majority suggests that the FBI failed to alert the court as to Mr. Steele's potential political motivations or the political motivations of those who hired him. But this is inaccurate." So Schiff is saying something that is an outright lie. Now, there's the proof. And here's the other key point. The Schiff memo is corroborating the Nunes and the Grassley-Graham memos because they expose how the dossier was the essential part of the FISA application. And if you look at the Grassley-Graham memo, it finds, quote, their words, the bulk of the FISA application consisted of the unverified Clinton bought and paid for dossier. Wow. Now Schiff tries to downplay the reliance on the phony dossier by writing in his memo that it only made up a narrow part of the FISA application. That, too, is a lie. And Schiff also writes that a specific section of the FISA application actually references the completely unverified claims in the dossier about Carter Page and June 2016, in the meetings that he had in Moscow. Page has denied over and over again it's never been confirmed. So Schiff is admitting that, contrary to his claims, the dossier did make up the bulk of the application to get the FISA warrant. Now, the Democrats' current position on the dossier, and look, they're trying to minimize it, is the complete opposite of what they were saying back in March during a congressional hearing. This is all politics. They're all liars and they're all phony, and we've been right for a year now. Take a look at this.
According to Christopher Steele, a former British intelligence officer who is reportedly held in high regard by U.S. intelligence, Russian sources tell him that Page has also had a secret meeting with Igor Sechin. According to Steele's Russian sources, Page has offered brokerage fees by Sechin. Also, according to Steele's Russian sources, the campaign is offered documents damaging to Hillary Clinton. According to Steele, it was Manafort who chose Page to serve as a go-between for the Trump campaign and Russian interests.
My focus today is to explore how many claims within Steele's dossier are looking more and more likely as though they are accurate. The reputation of the author, Christopher Steele, as a former accomplished British intelligence officer with a career built on following Russia is important. This is not someone who doesn't know how to run a source and not someone without contacts.
They know better. Now, former federal prosecutor Andy McCarthy and other legal experts are also pointing to a very key fact. In order to get the FISA warrant approved, because Page, Carter Page, he'll join us in a minute, is an American citizen, well, the FBI and the DOJ had to show that Page was acting as an agent of a foreign government and that his clandestine actions to help Russia were likely a violation of federal law. Now, as we have been reporting on, the dossier put the FISA warrant over the top. Without the dossier, they wouldn't have been able to get any judge to sign off on the warrant. We've also been telling you that the FISA application, remember, it was denied the first and probably the second time, but then the dossier was used to help win approval. As a matter of fact, it was the bulk of it, and it's probably why the Nunes memo says that the former deputy FBI director, Andrew McCabe, he testified without the dossier, a judge would never have granted a FISA warrant to surveil Carter Page. And by the way, they wouldn't have even tried for the FISA warrant. And speaking of McCabe, after the Nunes memo was released, Democrats accused Nunes of lying about McCabe's testimony on the dossier. Interesting. The Schiff memo doesn't offer up any evidence to refute that. Now, if Nunes was wrong, well, why didn't Schiff and the Democrats include a transcript about what McCabe said to prove the point? My sources tell me that McCabe said that and much more. Democrats didn't do it for the obvious reason, because the facts aren't on their side. Now, the Schiff memo also tries to make a big deal about Steele's credibility, given the fact that he had worked in the past with the FBI. Now, Schiff's trying to change the subject here and hide the fact that Steele used current and former Russian government sources in the dossier, and that none of the information, this is the important part, none of it was ever verified by the FBI. It was never verified by the Department of Justice, by Fusion GPS, which hired Steele. In other words, when getting a FISA warrant, the credibility of the person is not nearly as important as the credibility of the sources or where the information's coming from. And as we've been telling you, none of the information from Russian sources was ever corroborated. None of it. So Schiff and the Democrats clearly are trying to conceal this most important fact from you, the American people. Here's another key truth. The Schiff memo confirms about the two Republican memos. The GOP memos detail how the FISA application mentions that Yahoo News article written by Michael Isikoff about Carter Page. But what Schiff lies about is that Steele was the source for Isikoff and Yahoo News, which the FISA judge was not made aware of. He's like thinking these are two independent corroborating sources. No, one source, same person. And the Republican memos explain how the Yahoo News article was used to independently corroborate Steele's dossier as another source, but Steele was the only source. Another lie to the judge. And another yet key aspect of all this is the Schiff memo is admitting to be true, and that is that the former British spy, Christopher Steele, remember, why was he terminated as an FBI source? Oh, he was leaking to the media. And what Schiff and the Democrats conveniently leave out is that Steele lied to the FBI about talking to the press and bringing this information to them, which is why Senator Grassley and Senator Graham have made a criminal referral against Christopher Steele. The Schiff memo is full of other massive and outright lies as well. For example, Schiff falsely claims that Carter Page was never spied on while a member of the Trump campaign. That's not true, because with a FISA warrant, the federal government has the ability to access all of Page's old electronic communications, old emails, old text messages, old phone calls when he was a part of the Trump campaign. And that means that, yes, the FBI spied on the Trump campaign, and getting the warrant on Page allowed them to do it, which is why they lied to get the FISA warrant in the first place. And Page will join us and explain later on. Now, if the guy was a Russian spy, Carter Page, like the Schiff memo is claiming, why hasn't Carter Page been charged with the crime? And if the evidence against Page is so overwhelming, that the FBI didn't need the phony dossier to get a warrant, again, just like Schiff and the Democrats are claiming, then why was it used? Now, Schiff writes that Carter Page actually talked to the FBI in March of 2016, so after the FBI got the dossier months later, why wouldn't they just go to talk to Page again and find out what he knew? He cooperated in March. Getting a FISA warrant on an American citizen is supposed to be the last resort. It should only be necessary when the foreign intelligence that the government is seeking cannot be obtained through normal investigative techniques. From what we now know, the FBI didn't get in contact with Page again when the Bureau apparently got their hands on the phony dossier in the fall of 2016, only months before the election. Now, why wouldn't the FBI do that when Page had already been cooperating? None of this makes sense. And then again,